Hello and welcome to the English martial arts. In this episode, we're going to be looking at the sword and dagger. The English sword and dagger, a historical and martial perspective. The use of the sword and dagger in England is deeply intertwined with the country's martial traditions, spanning centuries of warfare, dueling and self-defence. The sword has long been a symbol of power, nobility and honour, while the dagger often served as a practical companion for closer combat. These weapons were integral to English martial culture, with much influence from native traditions. Among the prominent figures in English martial history is George Silver, an English gentleman and swordsman, whose writings provide invaluable insight into the English approach to swordsmanship and combat. The English martial tradition. The concept of martial arts is often associated with Asian disciplines like karate or kung fu, but Europe, and England in particular, has a rich tradition of martial arts which includes the use of swords, daggers, quarterstaffs and other weapons. In the medieval and Renaissance periods, combat training was crucial for both nobility and commoners alike. For nobles, proficiency in swordplay was necessary for battle, but also for personal defence. For the common man, the ability to wield a weapon was often a matter of survival and patriotism. There was a distinctive national style that emphasised practicality over flamboyance. English swordsmanship was grounded in a pragmatic understanding of violence and self-defence. This approach is well articulated in the works of George Silver, who championed traditional English methods over the increasingly popular Italian and Spanish schools. George Silver, defender of English swordsmanship. George Silver is one of the most important figures in the history of English swordsmanship. In his famous works, The Paradoxes of Defence, 1599, and Brief Instructions upon My Paradoxes of Defence, Silver criticised the foreign swordsmanship styles that had become fashionable in England during the late 16th century. Italian fencing, with its emphasis on the rapier, a slender thrusting weapon, was gaining popularity at the expense of more traditional English methods. Silver's main concern was that these continental styles prioritised finesse and formality over practical combat effectiveness. He believed that rapiers, with their reliance on thrusting techniques, were less effective in real combat compared to the cut-and-thrust swords traditionally used in England. The rapier, in Silver's view, lacked the versatility and force necessary for self-defence, especially in situations where an opponent might wear armour or in scenarios involving multiple attackers. Silver was a proponent of a broader, more balanced martial art that incorporated not just the rapier, but also the broadsword, or short sword in his terminology, dagger and other traditional weapons. He placed a high value on cutting attacks, close combat, and the integration of various weapon systems, such as the sword and dagger combination. The sword and dagger combination. The sword and dagger pairing, known as the sword and buckler or sword and dagger style, was a common method of fighting in both England and across Europe during the late medieval and Renaissance periods. This combination allowed the fighter to engage an opponent with the sword while using the dagger for parrying or delivering quick lethal thrusts in close quarters. The offhand dagger could deflect attacks, provide balance, or even be used offensively to disarm or incapacitate an opponent. Silver's views on this combination were practical. He emphasised the importance of a well-rounded fighter being able to adapt to different combat situations, using both weapons in tandem to defend and attack effectively. The dagger, in his philosophy, was not merely a secondary tool but an integral part of the combat system, essential for both defence and offence. He saw it as a vital weapon for use in close combat, particularly against opponents who sought to grapple or close distance. In contrast to the Italian schools that emphasised single weapon use, such as the rapier, Silver's teachings advocated a more holistic approach to fighting, where a swordsman had to be skilled in using multiple weapons simultaneously. His rejection of the continental obsession with finesse and duelling as sport reflected his belief in the real-world applications of swordsmanship. The decline and legacy of English martial arts. The practice of swordsmanship in England, much like of Europe, began to decline in the 17th century with the rise of firearms. However, the English martial arts tradition persisted in various forms, particularly in rural areas where the quarterstaff remained popular and in more formalised duelling societies. Despite this decline, the work of George Silver left a lasting legacy, influencing future generations of English swordsmen and scholars interested in martial traditions. Today, there has been a resurgence of interest in historical European martial arts, including English swordsmanship. Modern practitioners study Silver's works along with other historical texts to reconstruct the techniques and principles of English martial combat. This renaissance of interest in traditional swordsmanship has led to the rediscovery of English techniques that for time have been overshadowed by continental styles. The history of the English sword and dagger is a reflection of the broader martial traditions of England. Through figures like George Silver, we gain a deeper understanding of how English martial arts evolved and were practiced, emphasizing practicality, versatility, and effectiveness in real combat. The sword and dagger is a combination remain iconic of this tradition, showing the adaptability and martial skill that were essential for survival and honour in England's past. While the prominence of the sword and dagger failed with the advent of modern weaponry, their legacy endures through both historical study and modern practice, ensuring that the English martial tradition remains alive and respected. Thank you for watching this episode. Please tune in next time for another episode on English weapons. Thank you.